Welcome to the Sub Hub podcast. I'm Dani Moreno.
And I'm EmKay Sullivan. And today we are doing the end of year episode, and we have a special guest joining us in Francesco Puppi. Welcome.
Good to see you. It's probably the fourth time that I'm on this podcast. So
Yes.
I was gonna say we need to add your photo to the icon, just like in the corner.
I almost feel part of the family.
Featuring
Frequent
Francesco
guest.
Puppi, frequent guest. Well, we are very, very excited for today's episode. EmKay and I have probably been planning this, I mean, Puppi included, for maybe a month at this point, around that. But today, this is our end of year episode in the sense that we are going to highlight, support, celebrate all the great performances from this from 2024 season, various athletes across the globe. And today, how we are going to slice that up agenda-wise is we're going to have kind of 3 different sections. The first section, we'll talk about some big performances and moments, about comebacks, consistent runners, and then we'll switch to breakthroughs and inspirational athletes, team and community, a huge part of the trail running community, and then we will end with athletes of the year and performers of the year.
And for this, ranking celebration chat, we looked into several things. We tried to keep it to the marathon distance and under. We will probably chat about some 50Ks because we always tend to do that. A lot of the athletes who run the sub ultra races also dabble in the 50 to 55K, but we looked at people's UTMB indexes, the ITRA indexes, their ranking based on just their event, but also compared to other events, final series standings, and just our own expertise being professional athletes in the sport.
Yeah.
Great.
Francesca, I was going to say, since you recently did an incredible post on indexes, considering that this was one of our inputs, could you frame some of the caveats or considerations that people should think about as we discuss these?
Yeah, so the ranking system in our sport is definitely not ideal. First of all, because we have actually 2 ranking systems at least, which is of course not an ideal scenario because it's it's not very representative of the sport. Obviously, we should have just one ranking that is representative of the status quo. The second reason why these ranking systems are not always a useful tool. I'm not saying they're not a useful tool at all, because they obviously give us some information, but is that their algorithm, so the way these rankings and scoring points are calculated, is secret, both for ITRA and UTMB. So we don't actually know what parameters and how the ranking is calculated, which would allow us to really understand and make the scoring system objective. And the third thing is that there is probably bias towards the longer distances that instead tends to basically favors the athletes who are competing in the long ultras and very technical races, and doesn't really reward athletes who are competing in the short distance sub ultra space. So these are some of the things to keep in mind when we look at these rankings. Then of course I think it's also useful to look at these rankings to maybe eliminate some personal biases or things that maybe influence the way we see things and look at certain athletes and results. So on another hand, they're also a great tool for understanding the sport and actually knowing what is worth attention and what is actually a good performance, because the definition of a great performance on trails is everything but trivial, I think. So yeah, and then for like more technical stuff, people can just read my post that we can maybe link in the show notes.
Yes, I was going to say, if you are not a subscriber of the SubHub headlines, you definitely should. Francesco's post is linked there as well because I thought it was extremely insightful, especially for folks who
Thank
are
you.
very confused about the index system right now. Because like he said, there's a lot of like objective meets subjective. I would compare trail running to climbing and mountain biking. They also have these rating systems, but it could vary about where you are in the world. And there's just a lot of different factors. And then you add on to trail running that with our races, there things can change all the time. So even with Western States a couple years ago, there was a minor course change objectively. But if you are a runner in the race itself, you're like, that was a huge course change. Like I was running on the road for 15 minutes versus down a hill. So as you can see, this is the best we have so far, which is why we utilized it when prepping for this end of year episode. There's always room for improvement. I don't envy the person trying to figure this out in terms of math and algorithms. But we should always be striving for something like this, right? Because it does help us rank performances, compare races, create like great fields, etc. And people use these scores to get into finals of races, etc. So yeah, check out Francesco's post. We linked it in the SubHub headlines. We'll also link it at the end of this episode. And then last but not least, an input that we all brought in is our own expertise. Collectively, we probably have 15 plus years experience in the sub ultra space, which is kind of wild to think about. It might even be close to 20. I would have to add it all together. But we ourselves are competing on the biggest stages for these shorter distance races. We have lived and breathed this sport from this aspect. And so, yeah, we're bringing that to the table as well. But before we jump into this first category and section, here is a message regarding one of our partnerships. Hey guys, Dani here. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at Never Second. They quickly have gained popularity in the endurance world for their gels and powders, which feature a modular system that makes it super easy to customize your fuel intake, whether you need 30, 60, or 90 grams of carbs per hour. Personally, I love their products because they're easy to digest, they help me stay fueled during my cross training and running sessions, and the mix and match flavors keep things fun and fresh. If you want to try Never Second, head over to neversecond.com. That's NEVER2.com and use SubHub25 for 25% off your order.
All right, let's get started with our first theme of the day. Talk about some performances, some moments that happened this year. And I think we'll also talk about a couple of athletes, but let's start by talking about race tactics in these sub-ultra events like 50K and below. Francesco, you're very, very versed in this. You know, we saw you run an incredibly smart race at OCC this year, which we know is not a sub-ultra, but the man knows what he's doing, you know. You ended up finishing in the podium position again for the second year in a row. Tell us a little bit about where you think race tactics are in our sport right now. Are they getting better? Are they just the same? What did 2024 show us?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it's a lot on the athlete, and I think it always helps to be a student of the sport and also like understand the basic principles of training and racing. Like, of course, you cannot expect to go out at your like threshold effort in a 5 hour long race because it's not realistic. You know, you're not going to be able to sustain that effort. So part of it is science, and then the rest is maybe experience and art. I don't know how to describe it, but in terms of tactics, I think we see more and more athletes daring, like taking more risks, especially in the shorter distances. which obviously sometimes ends up in like big bonks and people like not having the race they want, but other times also in really, really good performances. So I think sometimes it tends to reward the athletes who are willing to dare and have the courage to do it, which is great to see, and it creates like a very exciting show for people and the fans, and it makes for very, very exciting races.
And I think that, daring to be brave looks different every race. Like sometimes it's the person that decides to go out and just take it. And other times it's, the classic Francesco or Dani where you kind of like, you're not in the front yet, but you're moving up all day. Like to have the confidence to know, like, I'm going to be fine and I'm going to catch those people is almost as scary as just taking it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, daring doesn't mean going out hard and being stupid, of course. You have to take a calculated risk and know what you're doing. So I think it's important. And yeah, personally, like it's very exciting to see experienced athletes like Killian, Remy, Judith Veeder, employing some like really, really good tactics and delivering almost every time.
Yeah, I thought of Judith as well. Just someone who's been at the top of the sport for half a
Yeah.
decade now. Her race tactics, I've only actually raced her a couple of times, but both times I was like, oh, she's incredibly smart about reading these profiles, where to move, etc. It's just like the field is starting to close in on her. Whereas before she was out in front, so you might have thought like, oh, she just takes it out every time. But it's that the sport is catching up to where Judith has been this whole time.
Yeah.
But yeah, another thing with these shorter races is that, at least something that I've noticed, yes, there's that high risk, high reward aspect of it. But as we see series like the Golden Trail World Series start to develop, and knowing that you have another race potentially in a couple of months, sometimes athletes plan their race tactics over many of races. So they might be more conservative in earlier races and start to take more chances as the season goes on, or vice versa, depending on who's there. So I think that's also been really cool. And then within the sub ultra realm, because there's races that are an hour and a half to 2 hours, and there's, say the Mont Blancs and Zagamas, or Zagama technically is a sub ultra because it's a 38K. That can take you 4 to 5 hours if you're a female. Like the race tactics are changing there. And we saw Malin Osa crush her way up the field this year at Zagama, turn out a second place performance there with tactics that, like, I don't know, some at times I'm like, you have to go out if you want to be on the podium, but that's not the case. Like you still can play both ends of the spectrum. And then the last thing I wanted to say is that everyone is getting so much faster that like you really have to know like how much space you can give people, because people can actually hold these high paces now. El Hussein, Remy, Patrick, Philemon Mbogo, Headlands and Mammoth Trail Fest, they're gone within a mile. And so if you don't go, like the race is gone. So there's a lot of fun in the tactics realm.
Yeah, and I think this year we saw a lot of that with El Hussein, like knowing that he couldn't let Patrick and Philemon go ever, but also just sitting on them for most of the race and then like out kicking them in the end. He's like, I'm just as fast as you, but I'm not gonna like lead this thing. I'm gonna make you do the work and then I'm gonna win it.
Yeah, that's classic Elysian tactics.
Yeah. I loved watching that this year.
It's not fun to race him though.
I guess it's more fun not being in
It's more fun to
the men's
watch.
race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, to kick off we have a handful of categories today, but the first category, which we are going to highlight athletes that we have chosen, is called Performance and Moments. And the two categories we have here are Best Race Tactics, Best Finish Line Moment. These are both, I would say, like up to the perceiver, right, of what you perceive of best race tactics. One of us might think that taking it out and being super brave and bold is awesome. Someone might think that, again, moving from the back like Mount Osa is awesome. And then best finish line moments are also objective. But to kick us off in this category, Poopy, you wanna start it?
Sure. I mean, I don't have a clear winner for each of these categories, but obviously, Alucine is an athlete that comes to my mind when it comes to tactics. It's easy to pick Alucine just because it won basically like all the races. Like it scored 1,000 points in the Golden Turtle Series, which means that he won 3 races in the series and plus the final, including the prologue. So 1,000 points. I think another athlete that I wanted to highlight that I also put in the Breakthrough Athletes of the Year category is Daniel Pattis, just because I don't think he's the most talented runner out there, but he was really able to deliver like at every single race that he ran. He had his first podium in the Golden Turtle Series in Asia this year. It was fifth in Mammoth. He ended up in fifth place in the overall ranking of the Golden Turtle Series, which shows his consistency. And besides the greatest four, so Patrick, Remy, Alucine, and Philemon, he was like the top athlete. So yeah, I was super impressed with the season and just how consistent and smart he was. And then yeah, for the woman, I think Judith is my pick. She probably had a tough time after OCC just because it's such a hard race to recover from. And then she was in the US for the Golden Turtle Series stages, and those races plus the international travel, it's a lot of stress to handle. So maybe those couple of races didn't go the way that she wanted, but in every other um, circumstance that she showed up this year, she was able to deliver. And I don't think she was always the strongest on the start line, but she probably ended up with a ranking that was higher than the values at the start of the race.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna echo El Hussein for sure. I mean, he beat Remy at Mont Blanc Marathon. He beat Patrick at Mammoth Trail Fest, and he beat Philemon at Headlands. All three different courses, different days. And I mean, we all know that those men are incredibly great athletes. So it's impressive that he was able to kind of outsmart whatever it happens to be all of them on those days. And then on the women's side, I think I'm going to go Madalena for this year. I think her race tactics, her being smart, was just like sending it as much as she could with Joyce every single time. And she never really got her, but I think it worked out for her. Like she just took chances this year and put herself in races that she maybe didn't put herself in last year in the same way. And it worked out for her.
Yeah, I the only reason I was hesitant to put El Hussein on mine is he is an easy name to write in for every single category we wrote this year. And so I acknowledge and would say El Hussein, but I do want to add Roberto De Lorenzi to the mix. I really thought his European up-down champs following that race, he ran it really smart and was able to move at the right time and clinch that title there. And if you haven't seen his Instagram post with all the races he won this year, there's a lot.
Insane.
It's
Insane.
insane. And to perform incredibly well still at the Golden Trail World Series final and take the Skyrunner World Series title. The man knows what he's doing when it comes to tactics. And yeah, I just think he gets a round of applause there. And Antonio Perez, he is a Skyrunner frequent. I also wanted to highlight him because the Skyrunner races that I followed that he was in, he did more of that conservative approach where he starts from the back and works his way up and would find his way on podiums. OCC technically is not a sub ultra performance, but it's one that it's like he does that style of racing in nearly all of his races. And this year he started a little bit slower than he did last year, and he still made his way up the Skyrunner World Series ranking. So I think he's an incredibly smart racer. And then on the female side, I also say Judith and I say Magdalena. Similar to Francesco's point, Judith, I think at times wasn't lining up with her all the cards in her deck, but she would still manage these incredible performances. And Mont Blanc Marathon this year to me was a tactics masterclass on her end. She was running against Miao Yao, Sophia Lockley, and Madalena Floria, four of the best shorter distance trail runners in the world right now. And she was the one that came out on top. And if you can go back and watch the live stream or even some photos and reels on Instagram, she's just sitting in the pocket behind them nearly the whole race. And once she made her move, then that was the move and she was done and she won. And I just thought her smart racing is what won her that race. So major kudos to all those folks. Fun. Next category.
Best finish line moment. We had a lot of like really exciting neck and neck finishes this year, which I feel like doesn't often happen in trail running, but is maybe becoming more common as people are putting themselves in races, getting faster. And we just have an injection of like more diversity, I think, in general in the sport every year. And that obviously just adds to the competition. So we'll start with you again, Francesco. What was your favorite finish line moment this year?
For the sub ultra distances, I think my favorite moment was the Golden Trail World Series final. Just because like the Fabulous Four hugging at the finish line and coming within a couple of minutes from each other was really iconic to see and was very, very inspiring personally. Also like seeing the athletes really tired, but also really happy from their races, their season. It's just it's a feeling that I know and that I love, and it felt like a shared moment that each one of them was soaking up and appreciating. So I'm gonna go with that race in Ascona Locarno.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I feel for us as participants, but none of us really pursued the Golden Trail World Series end to end this year. We kind of like jumped in, jumped out. But if you were invested in the series this year, watching those four men truly iron sharpens iron times four, and then elevating the entire men's field, like you felt that in your bones with that finish. Like you felt invested as a participant, and that is the best thing you can ask for, like as a sport, is the participants themselves are invested, but then the viewers are invested as well. And that's when you get that emotional connection that we see with football, soccer, basketball, like any other sport, is that kind of like emotional fandom connection as well. So I would agree with that. And then the other one was the Calamoro finish. EmKay might be highlighting this one as well. We do have the personal bias of having interviewed both Sarah Alonso and Julia Font, two Spanish women, after this race, but the battle that they had and then their finish line hug is also very emotional. Like if you were watching that live stream and seeing how many times they went back and forth, it was just like, again, that essence of sport.
Yeah, I was going to highlight that race because I loved watching Sarah and Julia battle, but I feel like Sarah gave us, and this is just Sarah gave us a couple of like finish line or, final 400 moments this year, one of them being at Calamoro and then the other one being at Kobe. There's that video of her on Instagram, and I absolutely died watching it, of one of the videographers being like, she's coming for you, she's coming for you. And I think it was Daniela was right behind her, and Sarah is
Therese.
running. Oh, it was Therese, yeah. And Sarah's running for her life, and you can just see the fear in her eyes. I feel like that's just very Sarah, but Sarah has given us plenty of finish line moments this year.
Going back to the Fabulous Four, so how we defined Remy Bonnet, Elzine Lazawi, Phil Munkiriago, and Patrick Kipngeno. I don't think we can overstate how much they're raising the bar in our sport. Like they're pushing trail running to a whole new different level. And they're just so much above everyone else that is crazy, and they truly motivate me to go out and train hard and get the best out of myself.
Yeah, but I mean, I would agree. I think that goes across the board and it I mean, again, it's really cool. It many times takes one person and last year Remy was untouchable. And even the year before that, he was kind of untouchable. Like Madeira, he was 5 for 5. And
That
so to see him go out front and then these other men, I mean, El Hussein has been in the sport for a handful of years and this was his big, he's always been there, but this was his year. And then to have
yeah,
Patrick and Philemon, who came on the scene just last year, adding to that, it truly is like a ship, a rising ocean raises all ships sort of situation. And it takes other people to be like, well, I can do that too. Like now that Remy's doing it, I believe I can do it myself. So I would agree with that. MK, I know you want to
yeah.
say something.
Yeah, I've got one more finish line moment that I just remembered. Broken Arrow VK between Christian Allen and Mika Boudin Rousseau for the podium spot in the snow, slipping around, fighting like within the last, 10 meters of that race. And it was Mika who came out on top, right? Yeah, that
Mika.
was dramatic.
That was dramatic. And they're moving so like slow mo.
Yes.
They're running so fast.
Oh, I loved
Yeah.
that.
Coming back
I'm
to
sure they
Remy,
didn't.
I think it's interesting to see how, despite achieving less than last year, like last year he won the Golden Trail Series, the overall ranking plus Marathon de Mont Blanc, Pikes Peak Ascent, and Mammoth Trail Fest. This year he's running even faster. Like his performances are actually better, but he's not winning because the sport has grown, and there is Elosine, Patrick, and Philemon that are they keep getting better and better. So it's actually amazing, and I think like I wish more people would realize how he's actually improving. And Remy's season may not look like his best ever, but it's actually the best season he's had so far. So it's incredible.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys can help me with this, but Remy to me always reminds me of Jakob Ingebrigtsen and how he came on because Remy has been a star since he's joined the sport at a young age, and so was
Yeah,
Jakob on the track. And then this year at the Olympics, you have Josh Kerr, help me MK, who are all the guys? Or Pooby,
call Hooker.
Yeah.
Cocker,
Oh,
oh yeah, Cole Hawker and Yair Nagus, and then the UK guy was out injured, but he'll be back soon.
Hobbs Kessler was right there.
Hobbs Kessler, and it's like it takes someone
Yeah,
like
Jake Whitman
Jakob.
was out, but yeah,
Yes. It takes someone like Jakob, and all those guys are stepping up to the plate too. It's like they might not say it directly that he inspired them, but he probably had a large part of their inspiration to dreaming even bigger. So I would agree. Remy is running faster than ever, and he might have just gotten third at the Olympics, but I'm excited to see if he gets a world record now, a couple months off. But yeah, I actually I love these
yeah,
categories because they talk about nuances in the sport that I think are strike an emotion, like we were just talking about, but don't always get that acknowledgement because we are more focused on who won. So yeah, thanks to everyone in those categories. The
yeah.
next,
I think
oh yeah, go ahead,
I
Boop.
was, as I was telling you before, more than our picks and the names that we put that we choose for each category, it's more important the why, like the reason why we pick these people. So each listener can, you know, think about it and come up with their own ideas and choices. And we may disagree on some, but that's that's why we're having these discussions.
Yeah, I love that. So reminisce on your favorite finish line moment and why. It's not sub ultra, but the golden hour will always be probably my favorite finish line moment every year at Western States. Um, all right. Next theme is consistency and comebacks. I think anyone in the sport, regardless of what level you are, can relate to this. Many of us, if you have been injured, maybe have some part of life where you can't put as much time into running as you would like. There's a lot of reasons why a comeback may be warranted, right? And there's always like the funniness of like, it's not a comeback, like I'm just coming back to where I was, but it truly is like you have to lift yourself up when you get knocked down. And I think it takes a particular mindset and person to get up once, twice, maybe even more times over. So whether it was the first time and it's really hard, or you're 10 times getting hit and getting back up, I think it's something we can all relate to. And then on the consistency side, this is something that I think is extremely undervalued by brands at times when they're looking to athletes who they're looking to add to their roster. They may look to the latest and greatest person who just won a big race in their first year, but there are athletes that get on the podium every single time. They may not win, but that itself is exceptional to be able to do that year in, year out, especially as the level raises, whether it's top 10 finishes at Golden Trail, top 5, top 3, or even if you're a person who has won many races, that is also very difficult. So we wanted to give these athletes some love and highlight because they are the backbone of this sport. Like if athletes gave up every time they got knocked down, we wouldn't have a lot of the inspirational stories that we have.
Yeah.
Do we reward more the breakthroughs or the consistency? That is another good question, I think.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of it is, like flash in a pan kind of thing. Like we see this every year with like even, things like Troy or you, Roy, like the recency bias is so heavy that,
Yeah.
it's why brands tend to put a lot of weight on UTMB week because that's when they are doing their, contract negotiations. And it's like, wait, but what about the rest of the year? Like, why did we forget about that? And so, yeah, let's let's lift up these people that have been consistent instead of just focusing on the last 3 months of the year when most people are exhausted anyways. But we'll start with comeback of the year, and I'm not gonna start this one for sure because I had a hard time deciding whether it was comeback for a race or comeback for a season. So Dani or Poopy, one of you take it.
Dani.
I'll go first since Puppi went last. Well, it's objective, right? Because again, comeback is the overall theme. But for the women's side, I think this story is Sarah Alonso's. She just comes straight to mind. She is that person that I'm talking about that has literally been knocked down probably 20 times in the last 2 years. And she just keeps getting back up. Like that girl is a fighter and it is emulated in her racing. Like being someone who has battled back and forth, I love racing her. Like she inspires the heck out of me because she does not give up and she gives every ounce of energy to every single race. This year, she missed out on her biggest race of the year, which is the Gama, something that she has a lot of pride and joy for. And she got like pneumonia the week of the race, was very sick, had to miss it. And then that led to a whole series of knockdowns. And she picked herself back up once again, ended up winning more races, earned herself a 4th place finish at OCC, not sub ultra, but again, just exemplifying that comeback. And then she continued to do great at the Golden Trail World Series final, which had an incredible field. And yeah, she's my comeback girl. What about you, Poopy?
Yeah, she's my pick for the woman. Sarah also won the Santa Leon short race, 24K race, just recently, last weekend. So yeah, really strong comeback after a difficult 2023 and some really low moments during this year. We've actually been in touch a lot, and I know how much she put into training and especially cross training, because a lot of times we tend to think that like our training is running, but I think as soon as you realize that you can actually train for these races, even if you're not always running, yeah, it's a great shift in your mindset, and it can truly help you. For the man, I picked Sylvain Cachard. He's also an athlete that has been knocked down several times and has made incredible comebacks. Not just this year, but it's kind of like it goes from like a really high to a very low lows. So his sixth place at Sierre in 2:32 was great to see after a tough year. It did not win, but it ran super fast, and is just a really talented athlete. I know he's been struggling with injuries and also some mental health problems. So every time I see him, and anytime I see him do well in a race, I'm just really happy for him.
And that's a time that normally would have been much higher. They just ran insane this year.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, 2:32 is, I don't know, is like running 3:28, 1500 meters probably.
Yeah. Is that the French national record as well for Sears and all? You know how they keep track of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy.
That's cool. I'm gonna highlight two women, I think. I'm gonna start with Lauren Gregory. I think Lauren was one of those athletes that like coming out of college, everybody was like, holy cow, like she's gonna blow us all away. But then after her indoor championships, she ended up breaking her foot and wasn't even able to compete in the outdoor championships. And I think it took her a lot longer to come back to competing than she had hoped for. So to see her have a second half of the season that was just like insane, that was like, okay, that's the Lauren Gregory we've been waiting for, like we've been patient, but she's here. And it was really cool to see her kind of rack up those performances at Golden Trail. And I think that this is just the beginning. The other one being Claire Rhodes. I know that she had quite a rocky beginning to the season. There were like 2 or 3 races that she had signed up for that ended up not happening because she was just having some nagging injuries. And she did race at Big Alta, but then I think ultimately that may have set her back even more. But then she shows up at OCC. She's an athlete who, could do really well there, doesn't have the day that she wants, ends up having to drop out. But then she comes back to the rut and just absolutely knocks that 50K CR out of the water and has an awesome day. So, and like a month later, gets second at Kodiak in another fast time. So those two women are probably my comeback athletes of the year. And then I think on the men's side, Dani and I probably have a similar one. So you can also highlight this, Dani, but Philemon. Philemon Kiriago kind of had like a rough start to the season. And then
Yeah, it
Sears
did.
and all was like, oh, he's back. Like, to finish that close to Killian in a year where Killian breaks his own record, and then, was right behind El Hussein at Headlands and was right there for all the finals. And yeah, I think we were a little disappointed in the first half of the year, but he showed up big time in the end.
Yeah, I don't know if it was much disappointment. We were just like, is he like, how is he
Where
doing?
is he? Yeah.
Where, like, is this intentional or not? Whether it wasn't, it just seems like mentally maybe there was a comeback at Sears and now where he's like, I know how to do this. And then the rest of the year fell in suit. Yeah, because I mean, as EmKay just highlighted, I think one of the most, again, this whole category is underrated. A lot of times, unfortunately, people get written off if they're having a rough go for a couple of months with how frequent our trail racing season is. It's really hard to be at your best the entire year. But the ability to bounce back from hard races is another essence of that comeback. So I hope you all can relate to this, this category. Again, regardless of where you are in the field, if you're in the top 100 athletes every time you race, like you're a consistent performer. If you had a rough time in your life and you're able to come back and have an enjoyable time while running, you're a comeback queen or comeback king. So we hope you like this category. And
And
EmKay has one more thing. Yeah. no.
Yeah, I think it's also important to like look at this and Danny and I have talked about this, I feel like a couple times, either on episodes or just with each other recently, like to look at this and remember like how long of a season trail running is. So many of us are racing like January to November because you can travel places and race pretty much all year round. And so to be able to kind of zoom out and be like, oh, wow, I actually did do a lot of good things. I just did a lot of things, and you can't always have like your best day, you know?
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hope you all enjoyed that category. Before we get into our next set for this end of year episode featuring Francesco Puppi, here is another message regarding one of our partnerships.
Are we gonna do most consistent when we come back?
Oh, shit. Sorry.
We can
Okay.
do it right now and then do another
Yeah.
ad break afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, go ahead.
So our next category in this theme is most consistent performer. And again, kind of reminiscent of like, holy cow, why is our season so long? Who showed up frequently and well and was able to kind of string together a whole season of racing this year. And I'm gonna start because I have like 8 athletes, so I feel like I'm just gonna tee you guys up. I'm gonna start. Actually, I'm gonna end with him because he's a definite. I'm gonna start with Anastasia Rupstova. She was the Skyrunner overall champ this year, and I'm pretty sure I'd have to double check this, but I'm pretty sure she won every single race that she ran in the Skyrunner World Series this year. So if that's not consistency, I don't know what is. Joyce Muthoni, also another athlete who she won everything after Sears and all. So the second half of the season, she was untouchable, except for the final at the Golden Trail World Series where she lost to Joylene, but Joylene did not run the prologue and was a little bit fresher. Would still put her in my most consistent category. And even prior to Sears and all, she was still crushing it. You know, she won Four Sisters. I can't remember where she finished at Kobe, but I mean, she's always right there.
I'm Broken Arrow.
What was that? Oh, and
And
Broken
Broken
Arrow.
Arrow.
Yeah, she won the VK and the 23K at Broken Arrow. El Hussein, obviously, like Francesco said earlier, perfect 1000. David Sinclair, not quite sub ultra all the time, kind of on that cusp of like 50K, but he won every race that he lined up for this year, except for the Moab Trail half championships. And even there, he was third place and was like a minute behind Christian Allen, who won. But I think biggest, most consistent athlete of the year in my book is Roberto De Lorenzi. Again, go look at his Instagram post. It's disgusting. He won so
It
many
is
races this year.
insane. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Roberto De Lorenzi for sure. Uh, just because I give you a hard time because he tends to race too much, even races that are quote unquote unnecessary. Like it just doesn't if there is a race, it has to go, even if like it's a local race. So there are like a ton of races that you don't even know that is actually won and competed in. Besides, of course, like 4 Skyrunning World Series win, the final, all the Golden Trail Series races, 1 European Championship title, and much, much more on the road, on the track, and cross country. So yeah, pretty incredible. And I'm also gonna mention again Remy Bonnet and Elusine just because of how consistent they have been in the Golden Trail Series and how their performance is really way above everyone else.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
And for me, I echo both what they said, because with Joyce too, you have to add in the Valsier Mountain Cup as well. She had a handful of wins there and podiums, but I also wanted to add Patrick because if you look at his Valsier Mountain Running Cup results, he won a lot of those races that he stepped in, and I would gathered to say that he didn't lose a VK this year. I would need to fact check that. But I'm 98% sure he didn't lose any VK he ran this year, which again, just underlying that consistency. But again, it's really hard to be consistent in this sport. And I think all these athletes exemplified that.
Absolutely. And before we get into our next theme, here is a message from our partners.
Hey y'all, it's EmKay. If you've seen me out on the trail or at a race this season, you've probably seen me rocking the Pit Viper Admirers. These heart-shaped glasses have been my go-to for a look good, feel good attitude on race day and just in training. Not only do they make me look way cooler than I am, but they come at an affordable price and they come in a style for any personality or mood you might be having. Pit Vipers are the sunglasses sunglasses would wear if sunglasses could wear sunglasses. If you want to run in style, go to the link in our show notes for 15% off your next Pit Viper purchase. See you out on Party Mountain.
Okay, welcome back again. We are on our third theme of the year, which is athletes that inspired us and athletes that had breakthrough years. Kind of same thing, but we still love it. We'll talk about some rookies. We'll talk about mental health game changers and like team dominance also, and best team performance. We'll kind of cover all of that in this little section.
Yeah, I did want to, with this section of breakthroughs, a big thing that we saw this year was rise of the rookies. I do think that we are entering the next echelon of this sport where we're going to be seeing more athletes come directly from track and field, NCAA's, collegiate careers to the trails. We've seen this throughout many years, to be honest. We have seen stars come through. Maybe arguably the biggest star to make that transition was Grayson Murphy. But even prior to that, you had Hayden Hawk, Jim Walmsley, who had incredible college times. However, what's changed now is there's a plethora of them, not just one or two names, but multiple. And I know there's European athletes as well. I'm just not as familiar with that collegiate scene. And so, yeah, I think as highlighted in the SubHub headlines this month, if, again, subscribe if you haven't already, there's kind of this new era of trail running where we're seeing this kind of, I don't know how to say it, but it's like a feeding machine. You've had athletes who have been incubated in the shorter distance trail races for the last 3 to 5 years. They're starting to move up, some of them. You still have greats like Judith Wider, Maud Mathis, who are continuing to do the shorter distances. But truly athletes who have tried and trued the Golden Trail World Series are moving up. And then you have this next batch of rookies that I think are going to be even greater than those of us that are already in the sport. So we're going to highlight some of those athletes. And then mental health is really freaking important for our sport. It's something that used to be kind of taboo to talk about, regardless of what sport you were in. And in a great way, it's being talked about more and more because, yes, we are physical beings who produce performances, but we also have brains and emotions that need to be taken care of. And so we wanted to highlight athletes who we think are doing a great job of also promoting that for the future of the sport, for those who are already in it and coming into it, because we spend a lot of time out on the trails. So you got to take care of yourself too. Do you want to kick it off, EmKay?
Yes. Let's start with our breakthrough athletes of the year, rookie of the year, rise of the rookies. I'm gonna go with Lauren Gregory on the women's side or Sylvia Nordskar. I had a really hard time like picking these between these two. Lauren is kind of more of the rookie of the year category, where Sylvia has been around for a while, but her performance at Zagama and even at Le Templier at the end of the year, I think were two outstanding performances. And then on the men's side, I'm going to go Daniel Pattis, also somebody who's kind of been around for a while, but this was really a breakthrough year for him, I think.
Nice picks. Yeah. I'm gonna go with Lucas Erle, the European second place finisher behind Roberto De Lorenzi in the up and down race and winner of ETC and also winner of a couple of WMRA World Cup races. Is an athlete that actually comes from college, like NCAA. Is from Germany, but he lives in the US. Is very young, still, I think is 19 or 20 years old. And this is actually its first senior trail season, and he's had some incredible results, which were super high level. So I'm super excited to see what he can do next year and in the future. For the women, I'm gonna pick Nina Engelhardt, who won both European Championship, the up and down race and the vertical, and Jocelyn Chepngeno, the winner of Sierre-Zinal and of the Golden Trail World Series final. She's very new to the sport, so I tried to stick to the Rookie of the Year category, meaning that it's their first year into trail running.
Yeah, I'm realizing we have breakthrough and rookie. Sorry, I didn't preface everyone on that. I also, for Rookie of the Year, am echoing Nina Engelhard. Her performances at the European Champs. I mean, those are the athletes that are winning many of these other big races throughout the year. I really wanted to see her at other races. And so, yeah, I hope there's more to come on her end because it seems like she has some wicked uphill speed. Joylene Chepngeo, I'm so sorry of how to say that. Anyone who comes and wins Sierre-Zinal on their first go deserves a huge round of applause. And then she went on to win the Golden Trail World Series final as well. And those two, when looking at the indexes, were two of the best performances of this year, period, like regardless of distance. So she definitely deserves a round of applause. And then my men, I really like who Puppi said, because again, we're not too familiar with the collegiate scene on the European side. So I think Lucas is awesome. I'm going to keep an eye out for him. I also wanted to highlight Josafat Kiprotich and Richard Omaya Atuya. Again, the men's Sierre-Zinal this year, which is something EmKay and I will probably echo at the end of this year, is the men crushed it this year on these shorter distances. And that was one of the best races of the year. So to come out again and have it be your first go at Sierre-Zinal and to be in the top 10, top 5, both of those men run for Team Run Together.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I think there's more to come. If Patrick and Philemon are giving us any taste of what's to come from that team, I think Josafat and Richard are guys to look out for. And then for breakthrough athlete, did you already say yours was Sylvia?
Yeah, I didn't mention my breakthrough athletes,
Okay.
actually, and I want to
Yes,
conclude
go
my
ahead.
answer. Daniel Pattis and Lauren Gregory, I think they cemented themselves as really outstanding top performers among the best of our sport after a few years. Being, of course, really good athletes, but not quite achieving the level that they have been at this year. So yeah, I think they deserve a huge shout out.
Yeah. We do have a spreadsheet that we're looking at, and we all have the same names, Daniel Pattis and Lauren Gregory. So I think that's a unanimous agreement that they too are the breakthrough athletes on a global scale. And then EmKay and I both put Sylvia as well, because when you're in the game for a while, that's what you hope for, is that big win. And you don't always get it. Like, there's only one winner of these races. And so to see someone like Sylvia, who's been in the Golden Trail World Series for many years now, get her big win, it's really satisfying, because you're like, I get that. I can relate to that. So yeah, just wanted to give her a huge her flowers that she well deserves. And then to finish off this category, as I kind of orated and overviewed, most inspirational athlete, mental health advocate. I wonder what Puppi thought when he read these answers. But I could kick this one off. On the men's side, it's our very own Francesco Puppi. I think it's really inspiring when athletes are transparent of emotional roller coaster that can come with the season. And Francesco had a point this year where he was really tired. So he decided to take a step back and he shared that with folks. And I just thought that was really empowering for people that, again, sometimes you get a little greedy and you want to keep going and you're like, if I just keep on pushing, it's going to get better. But 99% of the time, it's better if you just take a step back and rest, one step back, two steps forward. And then beyond that, Puppi is just really incredible at highlighting discussions that we should be having in the trail space, not necessarily pointing fingers, but it's like, hey, this is something that's going on. Let's talk about it. And he engages with people in his comments, etc. And he's always up for a chat. So yeah, don't mean to embarrass you or anything, Vivi, but yeah, that was my choice on the men's side. What about you, EmKay? Or should I say
Thank
the
you.
women's side too?
Maybe because I think that ours are the same, our men and women. So
Okay.
I'm gonna ditto on Dani there for the men, and then on the women's side, I'm gonna go with Grayson Murphy. This year, Grayson had a bit of a rough year for her, and she's been struggling with some health issues for a while. And as the three of us know, because we're all professional athletes, like many of us have social media requirements in our contracts, which isn't always that fun, especially when you feel like things aren't going that well. And Grayson took a step back from social media, which from a brand perspective is not that great, but she spoke with her brands, told them like, hey, this is what's best for me. And like, I can relate to that because I think when you're having a bad time and you're seeing everyone else like, oh, well, that person performed and that person performed and I wanted to be at that race, like that's really difficult. And I think a lot of people can relate to that too. We're also wrapped up and addicted to our social media that sometimes we have a hard time taking a step back for our own sake. And so I was pretty stoked to see Grayson do that. And then I loved that she came back and like just posted wedding photos and was like, I had a great time being away, by the way.
Yeah, I echo that. And then Puppi, before you go, I'll just add, because I think we kind of talked about this one too, was Sophia Lockley, kind of similar essence, kind of Puppi, where she wasn't feeling herself. Like, subjectively, fourth place at this year's Mont Blanc Marathon was incredible. And for a lot of people, they would have been like, F yeah, I crushed it. But she herself wasn't feeling herself, just like on various levels. And you could listen to our episode with her, the most recent one. And so she took a break and then she came back and she crushed it and she's happier now. So just another great example of if things aren't going well, it's okay to step away and take time for yourself. And seeing both Grayson and Sophia do that at such a young age within their career, I thought was incredibly mature and insightful and inspirational. So, all right, Puppi, we set you up. Let's go.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to add a comment on the reason why you mentioned me. For the people who don't know me or don't follow me or don't read what I write, sometimes the feeling I get is that I raise a lot of controversy or polemic, but I don't want to do what's best for me. I want to do what's best for the sport and the athletes. And I think by highlighting some issues that we have and that people sometimes are afraid to talk about and speak up, we start having discussions and we start thinking and working in the back of our minds on some of the things that can improve. Not because I'm not happy with how the sport is, but because why not striving for better? Why not trying to get better opportunities for athletes? Basically, this is my ultimate goal. Like I've always thought that my ultimate, like my mission in the sport is to make myself obsolete, like where like raise the bar up to a point where my performances don't count anymore, just because the sport has grown so much. There are so many athletes that are way better than me who deserve the same opportunities that I've had. and I'm not afraid to lose my privilege because of that. And if someone is running faster and better than me, they deserve to be supported and highlighted more than I do. So this is one of my goals in the sport. My pick is actually Ali Ostrander, just because of how open she's been about her journey through running. She's truly a mental health advocate. She's very openly talked about her eating disorders and mental health struggles, and she constantly highlights, I think, sometimes some unhealthy dynamics that our sport has and that a lot of athletes experience. For example, in the way they see their training, their performances, their relationship with coaches, and nutrition, and just a number of things that, again, it's really important that we talk about these issues, but not many people are brave enough to recognize them and to talk about them, I think. So she's been a great inspiration. And beyond trail running, I think Molly Seidel, she's been also very inspirational to follow.
I think those are great picks. Yeah, I feel that sometimes, respectively, when you have wounds from different traumas, you don't necessarily want to keep talking about it. And so, yeah, Allie's super brave to keep that discussion open and offer herself as a resource to other people who may be going through the same thing. So I think those are great picks. Well, to finish up this category, to highlight something kind of again on the same essence that Puppi said, like we are at a time right now in our sport where it is still moldable. Like it's not too big of a machine and too bureaucratic where the people that are participating in the sport don't really have a say. And so I think it is important to keep having these open discussions for as long as we can. Because sometimes sports get too big that then it just becomes a small minority who are making the decisions for all of us. And then just echoing that there's room for everyone in this sport, regardless of which step or kind of life you're coming into it. Everyone's stories are welcome. So yeah, thank you for that. Now transitioning to more things that I feel that truly emulate the sport of trail running is the team and community aspect. Something that we've seen more and more on the rise is this team identity within the sport. It wasn't long ago where you had individuals training on their own pretty much all year round, showing up, not even knowing who was on their team until they got on the starting line, being like, hey, we're actually wearing the same jersey. Who are you? But now we're seeing team camps, team training, like organized team training, showing up with team goals. I mean, we're going to highlight one of these teams where it's literally in their team name. But you are there to show up as a team, and, you know, a win is a win for the team in some aspects, not so much in others. But we do want to highlight this because I do think there is a future aspect to this as the sport continues to grow. And so we are going to highlight in this specific aspect, team dominance. Like, are there teams that, because they invest in the team as a whole, are seeing quick results just in the past couple of years and this year specifically? EmKay, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think that our women's team is the same as it was last year. At the beginning of the year, I thought maybe we'd mix it up a little bit, but the women's Solomon team showed up once again, dominated pretty much the entire year, not necessarily winning every time, but always like putting several athletes into a top 10 of a race. You know, Miao Yao, and Caitlin Fielder, and I'm trying to think of everybody. Oh, Malinosa. There were a couple of newer athletes on the Solomon, like there was the British athlete at the final whose name I'm forgetting, but she showed up in the top 10. Madalena Floria, like those women are here to stay. it seems. So, women's Solomon team. And then on the men's side, it gets a little bit dicier. I think it depends on, what series you're looking at, but like Team Run Together typically is like well sprinkled over several, like both Valsier and Golden Trail, where I think you have like Brooks and Solomon tend to also have pretty high performances, but like Brooks is more of Golden Trail and Skyrunner. Solomon's pretty much just Golden Trail. So I think it kind of depends, but I'm going to go with Team Run Together because when they do have athletes, they're typically on that podium, whether it's Valsier or Golden Trail.
I'm gonna go with Team Brooks and Team Run Together. Brooks because I think they've really created a team environment and a really good project. If we consider that it's a relatively new team and the brand that has just started to invest in trail running and to invest in athletes, and they've had some great athletes. Their most representative is maybe Roberto De Lorenzi, who's had an incredible season, but also how they're trying to build and grow the team, I think is should be an example to other teams and brands. And then Run Together, just because how competitive they are across different terrains and circuits in the Golden Trail and in the World Mountain Running Cup. And besides Patrick and Philemon, they've also been able to grow new talents next to them, which is very interesting. And they're expanding our sport in a continent where there's not been a whole lot of trail runners in Africa, and together with the Milimani runners, who've also had some pretty good talents, I think there are two teams that we should highlight.
Yeah, and Team Run Together actually just had they put on a race down in Kenya
Oh yeah.
just last week. And I think part of it was that you could also win a training camp with Patrick and Philemon, or I read something like that. But
I love that.
yeah, they put on their first trail race this year, which is really
Yeah,
exciting.
it's great. It was like a collaboration between Team Run Together and the Kenyan Athletic Federation. And I love to see it because one way to develop the sport in Africa is, of course, to organize trail racing and events and just to make the sport popular and a realistic opportunity for athletes there. So, I mean, Africa and Kenya and Ethiopia and Uganda are huge pool of talents, which is yet to be discovered, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I love how Patrick and Philemon are already local celebrities. It's like, win a trip
Yeah.
with Patrick and Philemon. I was like, yes, I'm gonna go.
Can I win it?
Yeah,
Yeah, can
the
I
local
show
stars.
up and win it?
I
Oh
love that.
man, I love that. I would agree with Francesco on this. Team Run Together on the men's side. I mean, if you took the top two individuals for multiple Golden Trail World Series races, they were the ones that were winning. And then Brooks, to me, just has had the most instant, like they're showing up instantly. It seems like Brooks made the decision that they were going to invest in trail, and then the very next year they're already seeing results. So to me, that means they're trying really hard, whether it's, via Instagram, promoting their athletes, investing in young talent, which I think is the way to go. A lot of their team is really young. Anna Gibson, Roberto De Lorenzi, Daniel Pattis, the list goes on and on. So I think they are going to be even more dominant and apparent next year. And then the Solomon women, I think they do have a little bit more of a team aspect this year. So I think before they kind of were like a premier soccer league, like they were able to get the latest and greatest athletes, and they all happened to be on the same team. Whereas this year they seemed a little bit more cohesive. Yeah. So I think they're ones to watch. But Solomon honestly has been doing team camps for multiple years, so it just seems like they're more of team like this year. And this is as someone who, these are all athletes who are not on any of those teams, so these are purely based off of our own opinions. We don't know what's going on the inside. Awesome. Well, that was an incredible section of athlete selections. Before we get into the last one, which are the performances and athletes of the year to wrap up this end of year 2024 episode, we have one more ad from one of our partners. So here we go. Hey everyone, Dani here. Leading up to OCC, one of my biggest concerns was staying healthy and not getting sidelined by any sickness. After all, the last thing you want is months of training thrown out by a cold or a flu. That's where Beekeepers Naturals came in. I've been using their immune boosting products for over a year now, and they've become my secret weapon for keeping my immune system strong during tough training blocks. Honestly, they didn't just help me stay healthy, but they also took away a lot of the stress of worrying about getting sick. Their star ingredient, propolis, is packed with antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals. My personal favorite is the throat spray, but they also have lozenges, syrups, and even options for kids. So if you're looking for a natural way to support your immune system, I highly recommend giving Beekeepers Naturals a try. Use code SUBHUB20 for 20% off any and all of your orders at beekeepersnaturals.com. Now back to the episode. All right. Welcome back. All right.
All right. This is our
All right.
final section. And we've covered some pretty cool stuff up to this point, but now we're going to talk about the athletes and performances of the year, or at least we'll try to talk about the athletes and performances of the year, but I'm sure we all have many opinions on this as well. So in this section, we will cover best female performance of the year, best male performance of the year, best sub-ultra, or best sub-ultra athlete, and on the female and the male side. Sorry, wow, my brain got jumbled, but let's get into it.
Yeah, I think we should start with performances before athletes. Again, kind of going back to the beginning, what we took into consideration are index scores, but also leaning on our own expertise of knowing the depth of races. A race may, depending on the conditions, may not produce the best index score, but it has the deepest field. So those should be highly contended as well. But I feel that we might all agree, but we will see. This one was kind of crazy. As my hairdresser would say, crazy badass psycho is what we call this. And it's when something more outstanding happens than you even thought was possible. And I'm going to bring it to the men's Sierre-Zinal race this year. Even despite it being another warm year, we got two of the best performances, not only for this year period, but of all time for the short distance trail based on index scores. And that was Kilian Jornet's and Philemon Mbogo's finishes at Sierre-Zinal. If you have any context of this race, what they both did was mind-boggling. From a race standpoint, Philemon executed a near perfect race. The only downfall was that Kilian Jornet was also in the racing field. Because Philemon came and overtook many of the world's best runners on their best day, but Kilian was the only one that was able to respond. And not only did he respond, he blew an astronomical finishing kick on that last downhill to solidify. And these race scores, if you know ITRA scores, they both got a 964 on the ITRA index, which is really insane. Like most of the time, if you're breaking 900, you're winning a lot of the world's largest and best prestigious races. So yeah, that's my pick for men's performance of the year. Puppi, I'm sure you have some stuff to say about this. What do you think? Or if you agree.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you agree.
I
I'm
do.
just assuming.
I don't have anything to add, honestly. They are the performances of the year, and they are because they came so close to each other that it's impossible not to pick them both. Yeah, it was the most competitive race of the year with the best performance of the year.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Dani, but I'm pretty sure we saw that this was the best performance of the year, like despite distance. You're
I
muted,
think
but
so.
yeah. So best performance of the year despite distance. Killian's 10th win at the race and a course record after all this time. Like, and it wasn't, I mean, it was a hot year. It wasn't like it was a perfect conditions kind of day. It was warm. So, I mean, yeah, watching those two duke it out is legendary. I think, yeah, pretty unanimous. Killian and Philemon at Sears and all this year.
Yeah.
Danny, you want to start us off with women's performance?
Yes. So I have two for this one. The first one, since we're already on the same topic of Sears now, Joylene's win. Again, her first time at Sears and all. It was also
Her
according
first
to
trail race.
her first trail race,
Sorry.
which is kind of wild. No, I know, it's crazy. According to ITRA, it was the third best performance of the year. However, again, bringing in that personal experience, I would say it should be ranked first based on the ones that are 1 and 2 are races I've never heard of. There wasn't as much competition depth, etc. So I would say on the ITRA side, it should be slightly higher. But you do have the comparison of year over year over year. That's what makes Sears now so great is it's been nearly the same course for the last decade or so. There has been some minor changes here and there. And so, yeah, just to beat that field. And then my other performance is Judith's Mont Blanc Marathon. Again, some minor course changes. It was a course record, but that field to me was the best. And maybe the only one that comes close is OCC from, who lined up, etc. Those two were the best races this year, but 50K is not sub ultra. So yeah, those were my two performances of the year on the female side.
Yeah, the only thing I'm
Yeah.
gonna comment on is that the Sears course has been exactly the same for
Oh,
the whole
well, there
history
we
of
go.
the race.
52 for
So
52 years
yeah,
or
yeah.
51? Yeah, there was just
Yeah.
the one year during COVID, I think that
Just
it was
the
a little
year
bit
during
different.
COVID
Yeah.
that basically we ran the what they call the tourist race,
Yeah.
but any other edition except when they shortened the race for snow was on the original course.
Yeah. And I'm just gonna, I mean, my performance of the year for the women is the same. Joylene at Sears and all, and backing it up with her performance at the finals, and then Judith's race at Mont Blanc Marathon.
I'm gonna go with Judith's Mont Blanc Marathon.
Her final descent was just so nasty. Oh man. Okay, so do we want to start with female athlete of the year or male athlete of the year?
Let's go with female since we just did male first.
Okay.
We should acknowledge that, like, these are our opinions, again, just taking all those different inputs, and we are basing this off of performance alone. There's a lot of components that could be taken into consideration, and this is for 42K and below because we are true short trail distance when trying to determine who these were. Do you want to lead it off, EmKay, since I led off the last one?
Yeah, for sure. I think by far and away, female athlete of the year, Joyce Muthoni and Jeru. She won WMRA overall, Golden Trail World Series overall. She showed us that she is a very dominant trail runner. Pretty much
Didn't
like
win
the
WMRA overall though.
Oh, she
because,
didn't? I thought she just beat out Scout.
No, Scout won actually in the last
Oh,
race, but she
okay.
came very close.
But they were
She was
within
second.
like a point of each other.
Yeah.
But she's shown that she's very dominant. The worst race she had this year was like her 11th place at Sears and all. So, and that's still so impressive, to have a bad day and finish in that position. So Joyce is my athlete of the year on the women's side.
Yeah, easy agreement there. I did look it up. She lost by 1 point in the overall series,
Yeah.
but
Crazy.
yeah. Yeah, EmKay said it all. It's pretty straightforward. This is her second year in the sport. I think she's only going to get better. I think she gained a lot of confidence, honestly, from her early win at Four Sisters. Like, she was so excited, and then she carried that confidence to the rest of the year. And honestly, I think she would have challenged Joylene in the final two if she hadn't rolled her ankle going into those last Ks of the race, because they
Yeah,
were
they were
running
neck
neck
and
and
neck.
neck the whole entire time. So Joyce is our female athlete of the year.
She is my female athlete of the year pick
Cool.
too.
3 for 3.
It would be like I was reflecting on how we could do like a more like a mathematical model that assigns a certain number of points for each race of a certain category. Like we could choose like 3 tiers, top tier like Golden Trail and World Champs or WMRA selected races, and then second tier and third, and then do the math and come up with the like whoever has the most points wins. And then there's like these more personal choices that are kind of more fun.
Yeah. No, I mean,
I like that. That's a good
there's
idea.
so many ways to cut this onion, because that's another thing we should, just mention is that in the sub ultra world there are so many different series, but also so many different types of races. Like, we're covering VK all the way up to the marathon distance, and there are athletes that are really good at specific ones, and then there's athletes like Killian who can do any of them. So we're trying to take this big world and squish it down into like one thing.
Yeah, it's really, really hard to simplify it at times. I will say Joyce, as far as the half marathon distance on ITRA, had 3 scores this year within the top 20, and she was the only female that had 3 scores in there. But Judith was the only athlete to have a top score both in the half marathon and the marathon distance. So again, that Mont Blanc marathon was crazy. It is like right at that line of a marathon distance. So if you're going short, then it's Joyce. But yeah, I love that, Puppi. Maybe for next year. All right, men's side
Should we let Poopy go first?
to close this out. Yeah, Puppi, take us home. Take us home.
All right, so my picks are the Fabulous Four: Elzine El-Zawi, Remy Bonnet, Patrick Kipngeno, Philemon Kiriago, and special mention for Kylian Jornet, who he only had basically 2 races, Zagama, Sherzina, and oh yeah, Zagama, yeah, that's right. Of course, he won them both in very like one with the course record and Zagama with a very dominant fashion. Just incredible how he's able to still improve his game at 37 years old and combine these short distance, very intense efforts with longer races
Multi-day.
and projects like the Alpine Connection. So like multi-days, back like trips in the mountains, adventures in the mountains, and all the stuff that it does.
Yeah, I started with Killian when we first went through this spreadsheet because his performances at Zagama and Sears and all were so insane. But I ended up picking El Huzin because he raced more frequently and won so many races this year. Killian is always going to be a GOAT, so it's hard to discount that. But yeah, I ended up going with El Huzin.
Yeah, I'll just agree with both of you. Agree with both of you. Again, just like Killian's dominance, it's really hard to believe if we'll ever have another athlete who has 10 wins at Sears now, 11 wins at Zagama. Like, that's insane. But El Hussein, Fantastic Four, they pushed the sport to a different level this year. And I think that's only just the beginning, again, with this next crop of younger athletes coming in. So yeah, both sides did incredible things this year, but the men's side, I think, moved the sport a little bit more for the men's side of the sport. The women have been having a year in the ultra distances, and I have no doubt that with Joyce and Joylene and other great women who have been in the sport the last couple of years, the sport is going to move again within the next couple of years. But got to give it to the men's side. It's just mind-boggling what they did this year. Yeah.
Yeah. Not to say that our sub ultra women weren't crushing it. It just happens that the ultra women were crushing it even more this year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So.
Well, thanks all for joining us for this end of year episode. We all think it's really important to applaud athletes across all these different categories. We hope you enjoyed these selections. The trail running is such a special sport. So we hope to preserve that spirit but at the same time, simultaneously progress it and move it forward into a state that we can all enjoy it in the future. Francesco, thanks so much for joining us. Again, we just got to add your face
Thank
onto
you.
our icon back in the corner. Any final closeout statements, both you guys?
Yeah, I mean, Trail Runner of the Year in America and also the Freetrail Trail Runner of the Year award, they're coming up, and it's easy for people to have a bias towards the longer distances and ultra runners. But just a reminder to consider the mountain runners, the sub ultra athletes that are they deserve just as much attention and recognition and as the champions like Jim Walmsley and Carnito Walter, Katie Scheid, and whoever ran super fast, super hard this year.
Yeah, I guess just to close it off, can you name a couple names that you think should be considered for the top 10 overall, Troy?
I mean, definitely our top picks for the male and female sub ultra athletes of the year. So Judith, Joyce, Elusine, Killian, Remy, Patrick, Philemon. Those are all great names. And then if we want to expand that a little bit, I think athletes like David Sinclair, Eli Hemming, maybe Miao Yao, they probably deserve to be in that top 10.
Oh yeah, our 50 to 55K athletes that we didn't really highlight because we're trying to focus on the sub ultra, but they will be, kind of left out probably in this also ultra category because for some reason they're seen as like a weird in between. But I definitely agree with those three: David Sinclair, Eli Hemming, Miao Yao. Like, let's not forget about their incredible performances this year.
Definitely. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank
I
you.
was I was just going to close out by saying I hope you guys had a good Thanksgiving. You have a good December holiday season. Dani and I will be taking a bit of a break from the podcast during the holiday season so that we can focus on being with our friends and family and taking some downtime and getting back into training. But please be sure to subscribe to the SubHub headlines. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, subscribe on YouTube, and we will see you in 2025.